Valley's Making Rounds Live, broadcasting and streaming live from the WIDU Community Room.
The WIDU Radio Network, WAGR in Lumberton, WYDU in Red Springs, WEWO in Laurinburg.
Making Rounds Live on 99.7 FM, 1600 AM.
We air every second and fourth Tuesday of the month.
Making Rounds Live.
The purpose of this show is to bring you information on health and wellness.
Here's the host of Making Rounds Live, Omega Jones.
And thank you so much, Ray. Welcome to Cape Fear Valley Health's Making Rounds Live. I'm your host, Omega Jones, and today we are discussing several topics. First, we have Dr. Michael Zappa with us. He's going to come during the second part of the show, and we're going to talk about cold and flu season. You already know local news, talking about the different things that we may come in contact with this fall and winter. We're going to talk to him about that. We're also going to need to let you know that October is ADHD month, and we're going to be talking about adult attention deficit ADHD is what we're going to be talking about. And we have John Bigger with us today, and we also have Dr. Fleischman with us today to talk about that. But I do need to let you know, and also finally, we have an event that's going to be going on here in the community, and it's focused to stop the violence in the community, especially among young people. All of that for you during Cape Fear Valley's Making Rounds Live. Now, don't forget that this broadcast is not a time for you to self-diagnose. This is for informational purposes. Or a family member suffering from something that we may discuss today, make sure you find yourself a healthcare professional. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as I mentioned earlier, October is ADHD month, and we have with us today Mr. John Bigger and Dr. Kenneth Fleischman on Making Rounds Live. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast today.
Thank you for having us.
Well, first, John, I'm going to ask you is, let's start with Dr. Fleischman. Dr. Fleischman, let's start with reminding everyone what ADHD is and tell us what it means and how it might manifest itself as symptoms.
ADHD is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and there are several different ways it can present. Some people lack the attention to certain activities. They may be unfocused. They can have difficulty maintaining focus and working on things, as well as having hyperactivity and increased impulsivity. Some people have one, some people have other. Most people have some of both. And it really can show itself in a myriad of different ways. We believe in the body it has something to do with the fine-tuning and the lack of the body not stopping itself from reacting too quickly, or it doesn't help it maintain focus well enough so that the individual can get through tasks or get through their work. Especially in adults and children, it's more, can they attend to schoolwork or do other activities? It really can depend on the severity within the individual as well. So it really impacts every aspect of their life.
Now, John, usually when we think of ADHD, we think of children. How common is adult ADHD?
Typically, it's about 4 to 5% of the adult population.
Wow.
4 to 5, not 45. Okay. And a lot of times that's not been diagnosed as a child. In fact, some of the research I was reading about showed that only about 20% of adults even know they have adult ADHD. So out of that 4 to 5%, only 20% of those know they have it. It just has never been diagnosed, but they do have some of the same symptoms that Dr. Fleischman was talking about. And they may have made it through school having ADHD as a youngster, but it may have not impacted their life, because a lot of times the children that have ADHD are higher intelligence, so to speak, so schoolwork comes easy to them. Mm-hmm. So they don't need to focus too much on schoolwork, and they do good naturally, kind of thing. But then when they get into adulthood and all of a sudden they got to buckle down and concentrate, wait a minute, something's going on here. and so that they struggle with either the college classwork and the amount of concentration, or if you don't go to college, you go straight into employment, the workforce, you may have problems concentrating and focusing on things during that time.
All right. Dr. Fleischman, John hit on this, but I just want to ask this question in a little more detail. Compared to children, how does undiagnosed ADHD look differently in adults?
Well, I think one way to think about it, for the most part, I'd say 95% of ADHD in adults comes from ADHD in children that was never treated. As John was pointing out, many of the individuals end up getting into treatment when they're adults because the workload in school, such as college or medical school, law school, any kind of professional school, if they want to go to a trade school, depending on the level of detail that's required, they may need aids with that. And so what it would look like would be someone who has difficulties maintaining jobs, struggling to get through those tasks, and they keep getting either quitting or getting fired because they're not doing what they're supposed to do. They may be working, let's say, at a food restaurant, go to a restaurant and they're making fries, but they keep turning around to talk to the person who's making the burgers, or they may be a waiter, but they keep forgetting what the different orders are. The same, or they may be driving a truck and they keep messing with the radio. And so it's where they just can't maintain the focus that's required for them to do their tasks. Another aspect of it is because children don't drive for the most part, adults with ADHD have many more accidents if they don't take medication. And in fact, what it's been shown is that the number of accidents in adults with ADHD will go down by 50% if they do take medication. And the belief is that 50 to 60% of the children that have ADHD continue to need treatment when they get into adulthood, although when I first came out of medical school, ADHD treatment stopped at age 18 because everybody believed it's only in children and it doesn't continue. And it's really not the case, and it causes many difficulties. I mean, in relationships where people with ADHD lose their temper quickly. They have a hard time even being still. And so somebody will interpret that as them not being interested in the other individual, or maybe they don't want to go to a movie because they keep getting up and leaving and going back in. And they tend to be very active and don't just sit around and talk. And for the most part, the interesting thing is what you'll find in this new generation is that they do like video games because there has something to do with digital media and how that does feed that need to remain active within their brain. And so it's kind of an interesting dichotomy. What I've seen in them is, unfortunately, they may like the video games, but when they lose, they'll often throw the controller, hit the screen, or throw the tablet. And so you see it coming up that way as well.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're discussing adult ADHD with Dr. Kenneth Fleischman and Mr. John Bigger on Making Rounds Live. Dr. Fleischman, are there any other health issues? Actually, either one of you can answer this question. Are there any other health issues or lifestyle choices that can increase a person's chance of having ADHD?
I don't know that it can increase their chance, but I think it can have an impact on either diagnosed or undiagnosed ADHD. If you are using the accidents that Dr. Fleischman was talking about, that's an amazing concept to me, but the distractibility is so high. So if you are under even more stress from something while you have ADHD, the stressful situation can impact your ability to focus or your ability to cope with things. And you've heard me say this on the show hundreds of times, the alcohol and drugs. That can have an impact on it as well. People have poor impulse control, so if you're impulsively doing drugs, you can imagine some of the consequences of that behavior as well.
Yeah, and I think that everything John said is right. And one of the times you'll see it is sometimes you'll get moms or dads that had ADHD when they were kids, and they've kind of controlled it well enough, maybe without medication, into adulthood. Maybe they're drinking extra coffee because coffee is kind of a milder form of the stimulant that can be used for the treatment of ADHD. But once they have 2 or 3 kids, everything is out the window. I mean, they have to take care of them as well as themselves, and children from an ADHD parent frequently have some of the symptoms. And so there's a whole lot of activity and stress going on. So it's not anything that they're necessarily doing. There are some situations where people will have a traumatic brain injury, and you can see those individuals without having had attention deficit hyperactivity disorder before really begin to have some inattention and problem completing tasks and maintaining their focus, whereas before that was not an issue. And so that's one of the few areas where you may have someone getting into adulthood, have a TBI, and then end up needing treatment for ADHD.
John, if any of our listeners are hearing this and they say that things are sounding oddly familiar, I recognize this, what would you recommend?
I would recommend they can do a couple of things. You can do the old-fashioned Google search and stuff like that, and look at some online tests and some surveys and stuff like that you can take. But my recommendation is go see a psychiatrist. If you have a car problem, you go take your car to a mechanic. And obviously an honest mechanic will tell you, here's what's wrong with your car, or there's nothing wrong with it. And I've said on the show a lot of times too how important it is to get a mental health assessment. If you feel like you're struggling in any area of your life, why not go ahead and see somebody? They can say, yeah, you do have something. Let's see what we can do to treat that. Or, you're within the normal ranges of behavior and everything's fine, and you don't really need any assistance right now.
How would a person go about getting diagnosed? And this question can be answered by both of you.
You can, go to the community mental health center. You can go to any psychiatrist, and they'll do a clinical interview, and they'll do some evaluation kind of tests, but more observational things with you, and ask you questions about past experiences and past behaviors and schoolwork and stress of an evaluation by a psychiatrist.
Dr. Fleischman, did you want to add to that?
I would just say that I think one of the important parts of that is asking the person that's in for the interview, what would their family say? Because this person with ADHD frequently doesn't feel any different at any time. It's not an episodic issue, it's just how they are. And to them, it all feels pretty normal. But if you said, well, what would your spouse say, or what would your significant other or your kids, or ask them about what happens with conflicts and how do they resolve those, or how long can they sit still? Do they watch television standing up? There are a lot of different traits people don't necessarily think about, or aspects to them. And there are some behavioral tests or checklists that you can send home with a patient to ask family members to fill out.
Okay. Dr. Fleischman, I watch TV standing up all the time. And my kids always say, Mom, focus. So, but other than access to medication, are there any other benefits to having a diagnosis?
Well, I think in a sense, the benefits of having the diagnosis is that person now can better understand how they are and what's been going on with them, because many of the folks that have ADHD can also have anxiety, at times may have depression, because they've had this since they were children. It may not rise to the need for treatment until then, but it's the way they are, and it may answer some questions about what's been going on, why are their relationships aren't stable, how is it that they keep losing jobs, or why don't they feel comfortable getting along with others, why do people always say they interrupt them all the time? The worst type of meeting to go to is one with a bunch of ADHD adults where everybody just interrupts each other and you can't get anything done. If you have a family of people with ADHD, the adults just talk over each other. But it really can help them in many ways. It also may, if they get treatment, just what I was saying before, if their car accidents go down, their car insurance goes down, and they're safer, their kids are safer, we're all safer. And they really kind of stop getting in their own way. I think that's really ADHD makes it more difficult to be as good as you can be in yourself. You just keep getting in your own way, either by blurting out something or impulsively and going and do something. I mean, people with ADHD are the best for saying, I know how to fix that. And usually it includes duct tape, a drill, and a trip to the emergency department because they just don't plan it out. They just say, I got it in my head and I'm going to go do this. And
Are you in my house? All right. Well, I know that you gentlemen have very busy schedules, so I'm going to ask you, is there anything, any final thoughts, anything that you want to say to our listeners, our viewers, before we let you go this morning?
Yeah, one of the things that I was talking to somebody today before we came here that has been diagnosed with adult ADHD, and one of the things he said was how medication helps him. It feels like he's a thoroughbred horse, but now he's got blinders on so he can focus on the track. And if you think about a horse race, horses, it doesn't slow you down. You still go as fast as you can, but you are able to focus more and keep your eye on what's in front of you. And I just like the analogy he gave me with that. And there's just a good way, too, that you can kind of do some self-managing behavior, not just through medication, but some psychotherapy to teach you, how do I manage my time? How do I make lists? How do I do one project at a time instead of, you remember little Billy from the family circus when they show him going somewhere and there's this little track going everywhere?
Yeah.
This helps you go to the store and back, and it helps just maintain your focus and kind of reins in your impulsivity to some degree.
All right. Dr. Fleischman?
I would just say, as John said, I mean, adult ADHD is a little different in that the medications that we treat adults with, they are the same as children, but adults don't seem to lose their mood as much. In other words, a lot of kids, parents will say, well, they don't have that spark anymore. They're not as bouncy. They're just not themselves. Adults don't seem to have that kind of emotional dulling that you may see in some children. And to me, whether you decide to get treatment or not, like John said, learning about it with cognitive behavioral therapy, learning some techniques for managing it, getting medication, that's up to the patient. We don't force that, but knowledge is always a good thing. And knowing is better than not knowing because it really puts the power and control back into the hands of that person, and now they can decide what to do with it. They really don't have to do anything, but it really could help in this case.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. John Bigger, Corporate Director of Psychiatric Services for Cape Fear Valley Health's Behavioral Health, and we had with us today Dr. Kenneth Fleischman, who is a psychiatrist here in the community. Now, when we return, we're going to bring in Dr. Michael Zappa. We're going to talk about how we can protect ourselves from cold and flus and all these other icky things when we return on Cape Fear Valley Health's Making Rounds Live.
We'll be right with more of Making Rounds Live.
Cape Fear Valley's Making Rounds Live.
Broadcasting and streaming live from the WIDU Community Room on 99.7 FM, 1600 AM.
The WIDU Radio Network.
Attorney Jenny Ellis has pleaded guilty to a reduced charge over efforts to overturn Donald Trump's 2020 election laws in Georgia and says tearfully she looks back on that time with deep remorse. Ellis is the fourth defendant to enter into a plea deal with prosecutors. Republicans and the North Carolina Senate advanced a map proposal on Monday for the state's congressional districts beginning in 2024 that could position the party to pick up at least 3 seats in the U.S. House next year. The potential gains would be a boon to congressional Republicans. U.S. House Republicans are meeting now to pick a new speaker. With multiple candidates currently in the running, members are casting a successive series of secret ballots with the candidate who garners the fewest number of votes in each round dropped from the running. Retired state employees will be getting a one-time bonus this week equal to 4% of their annual retirement allowance. That'll happen on Wednesday. Mike Trayley, NCI News.
Leaky faucet or pipes?
Call Mike's Plumbing.
Clogs, water heater problems, sewer services?
Call Mike's Plumbing.
Need new pipes? Backflow testing?
Call Mike's Plumbing.
Hey, I'm Mike with Mike's Plumbing. Your plumbing needs should never be a DIY project. Give us a call honoring military, first responders, and teachers with a 10% discount as we serve residential and commercial customers.
Call the best and flush the rest. Mike's Plumbing, doing business as Jesus would. 910-885-5353 or mikesplumbingnc.com.
Call Mike's Plumbing.
WIDU News. I'm Julio Flores. A ribbon cutting to celebrate the reopening of the Dorothy Gilmore's Therapeutic Recreation Center is scheduled for 10 a.m. Friday at the center, 1600 Purdue Drive. The Gilmore renovation includes a new interactive sensory room and family restrooms, remodeled kitchen with updated appliance, resurfaced parking lot, and new paint and flooring through the facility. The project also includes a nearly 4,000 square foot expansion, making the new size of the center 15,444 square feet. The project received $775,000 from the Parks and Recreation
Select 5G unlimited plans required. Less up to $1,000 trade-in/promo credit applied over 36 months. Promo credit ends if eligibility requirements are no longer met. 0% APR. Trade-in conditions apply. One offer per eligible Verizon line. Additional terms apply.
Finding great candidates to hire can be like, well, trying to find a needle in a haystack, but not with ZipRecruiter. Its powerful technology actively finds and invites qualified candidates to apply to your job. So while other companies might deliver a lot of hay, ZipRecruiter finds you the needle in the haystack.
See why 4 out of 5 employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. Try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/free. That's ZipRecruiter.com/free.
We now return to Making Rounds Live.
Cape Fear Valley's Making Rounds Live.
Broadcasting and streaming live on the WIDU network, 99.7 FM, 1600 AM. Here's Omega Jones.
Thank you so much, Ray. Welcome back to the second segment of Cape Fear Valley Health's Making Rounds Live. Now, this is for my parents and my grandparents. The guests that I'm getting ready to introduce, they're going to talk about upcoming events that you are definitely going to be interested in, especially if you have teens and tweens. They're going to have some real talk. I mean, real heavy, deep, heart-to-heart talk about gun violence and what happens to your body when you're a victim of gun violence. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mr. Kevin Brooks, director of the Group Theory. We also have with us today Sergeant Alpha Caldwell. Yes, Sergeant Caldwell's first name is Alpha, so you have Alpha and Omega in the room.
Yes, sir.
And we also have with us a gentleman he is no stranger to this broadcast, Dr. Michael Zappa. Now, Dr. Zappa, I already know that you're here to talk about Cape Fear Valley's involvement with the upcoming events, but I do have to ask you this because it was all over the news yesterday. The CDC says that we need to go ahead and get our flu shots because of these respiratory viruses that are expected. So how can we take care of ourselves so we don't become a statistic this cold and flu season?
Thanks, Omega. Important message that CDC is bringing out for all of us to take home. And it's what we learned as we survived coming through the COVID pandemic, is that respiratory viruses are dangerous. So whether you're talking about the flu, whether you're talking about RSV, or you're talking about COVID, there are certain populations that are high risk and can wind up hospitalized and can even die. So vaccines are available to help us protect ourselves from the flu and even from the latest strain of COVID. So I really encourage everyone 6 months and older to get vaccinated against these. In addition to that, you've got to remember the things that we did really well in COVID, the hand washing, being courteous to others when we know that we've got what we think is just a simple cold, minimizing contact and keeping our distance, that kept us a whole lot safer. It's funny, since we've gone back to a normal life, I'm sure everybody can raise their hand and say, oh, well, yeah, I've gotten more colds now in the last 6 months than I had in the prior 3 years. Mm-hmm. There's actually science behind that. So keep yourselves safe this year. We still see lots of people hospitalized, not the crazy numbers that we had a couple of years ago, but it is early. But one of the things I can share you from our own experience here locally is that we're seeing more children turn positive for COVID than actually adults. Wow. But what that's going to do is if you're in a household with young children going to school, their colds could get grandma, grandpa, or the people who have serious illness pretty sick, and they can wind up in the hospital. So be cautious, wash your hands frequently, distance when you're sick, and consider getting vaccinated.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Zappa. I already know my producer is like, she went off course. But that's how I do. I'm driving and I just say I want to turn left. So, but anyway, as I mentioned earlier, there are some events that are coming up in the community that is going to help the community understand gun violence and the destruction I call it, behind gun violence. Sergeant Caldwell, give us a little background of how these events came about and what is the main goal of these events?
So the Fayetteville Police Department, we received a grant. So with that grant, it's because of the rise in the youth violence that everybody is seen and affected by. So you have different agencies, the school districts, different community members that are trying to come together to combat this youth crisis. Everybody's trying to figure out, how do we do this? How can we fix it? How can we make it better and make a change, a difference? But everybody's trying to do it in their own respective groups. So now with this grant, we're trying to do it in a collaborative effort. Coming together with these groups to come up with a goal to help our youth, to help our children, our kids. So we've got community members, we have group theory that we're collaborating with, Cape Fear Valley we're collaborating with, and what it is the goal. It's not a shock and awe, scare all, but it's bringing reality to the children that we want to empower you on how to be able to handle situations. That is more than just quick and easy and picking up a gun, that it's okay, you can be empowered to handle this a different way. So we're coming together to try to help conflict resolution. And in that, showing them this is what happens when you do get shot. If you don't die, because everybody's like, okay, you're dead, that's it. But no, what happens if you do not die? What happens to your body? How it affects not just you, but now you're seeing the side effects on your family. So that's what we're trying to bring to the table, to show our youth, to show our children.
It sounds like an in-your-face type of thing.
Yes.
When is the first event?
It's supposed to be Monday, November the 13th at Smith Recreation Center from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m.
All right. Kevin, tell us a little bit about your organization and how you all became involved with this.
Okay, well, the name of my organization is Group Theory Incorporated, and under the Group Theory, we have started a project called Approve Project. Approve is an acronym that stands for Proactive Responsible Outreach Over Violence with Education. So we tie directly into events like this because we are basically the ear to the community. We advocate on behalf of the community, and we have to educate the community. And some of the persons that we are involved with are gunshot victims. And I'm pretty sure that nobody really has an idea of what happens on the scene. So bring those persons to that. They're just carriers. Once they see it, we can't get everybody in the community to go. But we have to create advocacy even with the people that aren't, with my group or with this group. So our job is to bring people to the event, get them exposed to it, and help them get educated on what happens when these sequences happen, unfortunately.
Ladies and gentlemen, Sergeant Alpha Caldwell. We also have Mr. Kevin Brooks with us today and Dr. Michael Zappa talking about gun violence events that are going to be going on in the area. Now, a little birdie told me that Cape Fear Valley Health is a partner in this event. And one of the things that the health system is doing is, so Dr. Zappa, I'm going to bring you in on this. How did Cape Fear Valley get involved, and what are you guys going to be doing?
So we're excited to be involved. Actually, the police department reached out to us directly about how we can help as a hospital, as a health system, how we can help our community and cut down on this violence. There's not a weekend that goes by that we don't have multiple gunshot victims coming through our emergency department. And this past weekend was no exception. So we want to be part of that solution. So this is a great project, a great opportunity for people who may be struggling or the youth who are at risk of making the easy choice that has very hard consequences. And that's really the theme that we're going for in this event is, it's your life, easy choices, but hard consequences. So you need to think. So in addition to having the opportunity to listen to an actual 911 call, understand what goes on at the scene, we're then going to have the opportunity that few lay people get. I've got lots of our doctors and our young physicians in training who are going to come and set up stations and use some of our simulation tools and train them and show them what happens when a bullet enters various parts of the body. We'll have a station set up to show what happens when a bullet penetrates your skull and enters your brain. What happens when a bullet hits your spine? How about when it hits your heart, your lungs, other parts of your abdomen? What if it hits your arms or legs? So these are the tools that we use to train our trauma surgeons, our emergency medicine residents. So few lay people get to see these. So it will be graphic, but it's important to understand that, as Sergeant Caldwell pointed out, when somebody gets shot, they can have one of three outcomes. They could be lucky, like the video game, where you get another chance at life, but that's a small percentage. You might die because despite the best medical care available, you can't survive certain injuries. But you might survive, but life will never be the same. We're going to talk to people about what it's like to get shot in the belly and never go to a tube. We're going to talk to people about what it's like to get shot in the spine and live your life in a wheelchair. So those are some of the things that we're going to expose the participants to. And when that's done, we're going to also have training in what's called Stop the Bleed. Stop the Bleed is a formal training that says, okay, if you're around someone who's a victim of a gunshot, how do you help stabilize them so they can get to us and we can try and save their lives?
Ladies and gentlemen, in the middle of a very interesting conversation with Sergeant Alpha Caldwell, we also have Mr. Kevin Brooks with us today and Dr. Michael Zappa talking to us about events that are getting ready to take place in our community to really inform the community on what happens during gun violence and the after effects. So, Kevin, let's go to you. How do you see the current situation with our youth and gun violence in our community right now?
Okay, we don't have enough time to talk about how I really feel about it, but I'll be very short and say we've lost value. A lot of young people have lost value in the sense of 4 years from now, 5 years from now, when I'm 30. And a lot of it stems from society, the things that they're introduced to very early. It's not the quote-unquote only fault of anybody. It's not the only fault of the parents. It's not the only fault of the teachers. Where we are in society. So you have to find some sort of balance to that. And that's one of the things that we want to do with the education piece, is to give them some idea of what later looks like. And that this is where you are right now, maybe the mentality that you have right now, maybe the situation that you're in right now. But if you don't want to be in this situation, if you don't want to be in this mentality, there are options and there are resources. Our job is to connect to where those resources are. It's great to have the ear and to hear Dr. Zappa talk about some of the things that's happened at Cape Fear Valley that we don't know about. Yeah. And it's frankly, we don't know about it because we're not there every day. And we haven't been through that traumatic experience yet. We have to have a relationship with our police department to understand what goes into the mentality of them when they show up on the scene. And to be frank with you, I have to let the community know that these are human beings. So that same trauma that we're reading about on the news, the persons that show up take that with them. So it's keeping it real, I guess you can put it that way. But I've always been a realist with the situations that we're in, and so bringing young people, specifically those that are maybe 25 and under, into the realization of where we are and what can be done about it, that's pretty much my job.
What has changed since we were kids, since our grandparents were kids? What has changed to where nowadays the teens see guns and gun violence differently than the way we saw it? Because I know when my kids were coming up, I wouldn't let them play with a water gun.
I grew up like that too. My mom wouldn't let us have guns, and I got 4 brothers, so that was already a thing. But technology and exposure. They're exposed to things at a very, very early age through technology. How many times do you go out to eat and you see a kid sitting there with the cell phone, watching TV? So they're not communicating with the people that are at the table with them. People want to know why our brothers and sisters don't get along in the same house. It's because they can go in their room and have 200 friends or 2,000 friends through social media. YouTube exposes them to all kinds of stuff. We can't leave out music, but we can't blame just music because there's TV. So when you look at all the substances that are around these kids, this is what I'm saying about the competition when I'm talking to parents. Your competition is everything else. So how do you get into the psychic of your child when you're handing them all these things that you actually pay for? You buy the cell phone, you pay for the internet service. When I was a barber for 25 years, I had people come in and say, first thing they started saying was, "What's your Wi-Fi?" So kids know how to get that and to pull a phone from a person. I know people personally who have tried to kill themselves because their parents took their phone. So it's reality. It's what we're dealing with, and that's part of our education. To let people know that these things are going on, and so when people start criticizing who's doing the work and who's working, they went out and got the grant. I didn't get the grant. They went to the Cape Fear Valley to do the program itself. So my lay job is to go out and expose people to this, because if not, then his time is wasted and the money gets wasted. So, but the young people just exposure too early and too often, and COVID was real, and a lot of kids missed out on a lot of education that you and I might have gotten at 11, 12, and 13 years old, and 3 years later they're 16, 17, 18. You don't get those years back.
No, you don't.
And we can't blame the school system. We can't blame the politicians. None of these people knew what to do when COVID happened. So we have to react to it, and it's going to take a whole lot more people than we have right now at the table.
Sergeant Caldwell, before I ask you about what you guys have planned for the first event, a police officer coming onto the scene, describe that to us. What goes through your mind? What do you see?
So depending on whatever the scenario, but chaos, you see chaos, and then you're trying to manage that chaos. You're trying to preserve evidence. You're trying to your mind is all over the place. Preserve evidence, manage the scene, get help to the victims. If somebody's hurt, getting help to the victims, making sure nobody leaves. So if you have witnesses, you'll be able to maintain them and keep them there, so that when detectives arrive on scene, they're able to get information to solve whatever the crime may be. So our minds are constantly going, making sure this is done, make sure this is taken care of. Yes, it's very chaotic, and it's trying to maintain that chaos and may remain calm within yourself and make sure you're managing it all.
Wow, that's a lot.
It is a lot.
Tell us what you have planned for the first event.
So for the first event, we're going to start off with a 911 call. People don't understand that when they call 911, there's a list of questions that have to be answered. But in the heat of the moment, everybody's hollering and screaming, "I just need an officer. I need medical. Somebody get here now."
Yeah.
And it's frustrating for the person on the other side of the phone that is asking for this, because there's a step process that they have to go through. So getting them to understand that, to hear the 911 call, and then when officers arrive, what happens when the officers arrive? Why are you being questioned? Why are you even being approached? What is going on? Why are they asking you the questions that they're asking you? Why are they telling you not to leave? Why are they telling you to stay? So trying to help them to understand why these things are happening. And then on a detective's perspective coming in, and why is a detective talking to me? Why are they asking these questions? And letting them know that we have been on homicide scenes where you have people who've been shot, who are wounded, laying there, and you have people that are cleaning up the crime scene. They're collecting shell casings. These things are happening. And explaining to them when these things are happening and these things are taking place, what that does to the investigation. It prolongs the process. It makes it, and I don't want to say more difficult, but it just makes it prolongs us trying to bring resolution.
Yeah.
And then after that, being able to have a detective and explaining a case, then it's what happens when the detectives get there. Then it's going to lead into, okay, now we have medics, we have EMS that's arrived on scene, and that's where it will lead into the medical aspect of this is what they do on their end, this is what they see on the medical perspective.
Dr. Zappa, I know that you've already said you guys receive multiple gunshot victims at the emergency department. Without really freaking out our viewers and our listeners, could you just give us an idea of what you see?
let me start with what the victim's going to experience, and that's a little preview of what we're going to do during the event. Let's say you're fortunate, and you think you're fortunate because you got shot in the arm, and you come to us by EMS. You'll arrive in our trauma room. There is a team of people standing around you. There are bright lights. The room is cold. We will cut all your clothes off, every bit, because we need you stark naked, because we don't know where that bullet may have come out. So, real case example, somebody got shot in the upper arm. We didn't find an exit. We got them stark naked. We're checking them. All of a sudden, their heart totally stops. What we then wind up doing is we open their chest right there in the emergency department. That means big scalpel, big scissors, and we break all your ribs and go right in there and try and get that bullet out of the heart and revive you. 90% chance when we're having to do that, 90% of those people don't live. Every once in a while, we get a save. But the two key points there are you can get shot in the arm and die, because ballistics, bullets, almost have a mind of their own. In this particular case, it tracked along the bone, followed the rib cage, and then decided to bounce right into the heart. So there's no such thing as a simple gunshot wound. And the procedure that we have to do, sometimes to lay folks, and I'm not meaning to scare anyone, looks like, well, you guys are cold and callous. How could you do this? We need to do all this in minutes. And that's why we have a whole team, and we need that full exposure. And if we're going to save someone, we've got to save them right there and then. So that's just a little taste of what actually happens in the emergency department. And that's some of the things that we're going to get to share with participants who come out on the 13th.
Okay. Kevin, other than the obvious, why would you encourage parents and grandparents to bring their kids, their teenagers, their tweens to this event?
Because when I talk to teens, it doesn't seem real to them. Because usually when somebody gets shot, people scatter, they run. So they don't see their reaction. They don't see what happens in the emergency room. But these parents and grandparents show up when they get the phone call to come to the hospital because a loved one has been shot. You want to know what that feels like as much as you can without going through it. So that when you're talking to your kid, or you're talking to your grandson, or you're talking to your neighbor, unfortunately, some of the people that we see, someone already knows that this person is in a situation or a scenario that can lead to violence. Mm-hmm. If they have this, if they're equipped with this information, this education, then that conversation changes. It can go to another level. And that's what we want. We want people to be educated on the whole total effect of this situation so that we can get the total resources and the investment to prevent these things from happening. And we forget about the strain that it puts on all of these persons, all of those persons. They're human beings, all of the persons at social services. I'm just now learning about victim advocacy and what that program is, because people are calling to say, I've been shot, I can't go to work. I got a gentleman right now who won't be able to walk for a whole year. He has a son, and he's trying to figure out where the money comes from, how he's going to get assistance. Wow. Disability is not night and day. It's not tomorrow. So there's a process to that. So we won't do that part of education right on November the 13th, but it leads to that.
Ladies and gentlemen, in the studio with us, Dr. Michael Zappa, Sergeant Alpha Caldwell, and we also have with us today Mr. Kevin Brooks, telling us about an event that is going to be going on in the community on November 13th. It's in your face, but it's needed. It's really and truly needed. Sergeant Caldwell, have other areas in the country tried this similar program, or is this totally new?
Not to my knowledge in other places, but for here it's totally new.
Okay.
Yes. So.
All right. And if anyone wants to learn more about this event, is there a number they can call? Is there a website they can go to?
They can call me at 910-433-1487. And we also have our community engagement coordinator, Miss Najeri Fikes, and she can be contacted at 910-433-1017.
All right. And before we close out, I'll just go around the table. Does anyone have anything else that you want to add, or something you want to stress to the community, something that we may not have touched on? And Kevin, I'll start with you because you look like you really have something to say.
I guess I'm always, there's a way to get the information that you need. You can start by following us at the Group Theory on all social media. And again, the Proof Project is a level of what we do. And we have to be multifaceted. And for those persons that are not a part of an organization, but you have free time, and you can come to events like this, just come and witness just for yourself to figure out what it is that you can do on site and on scene. So it's going to be at Smith Recreation Center. I don't know if we mentioned that. But you'll see a host of, I'm sure, flyers and different types of ways to advertise this event. And we're fortunate to be a partner with Cape Fear Valley and the police department and a host of other people across this community, because we cannot do anything by ourselves.
Yes.
All right. And Sergeant Caldwell, once again, Dr. Zappa mentioned it, or maybe Kevin, you mentioned it. The police department went out and got this grant.
Yes, ma'am. It's called we call it the YES grant, Youth Empowerment and Safety Grant is what the purpose, or what it's called, named. But the purpose of reaching out to our youth, empowering them, teaching them, not just the kids, but also their family members who may recognize or see that their child is something's off. You can tell when something's off with your kids. Something's not right. They act different. And this is just, if you notice that, or if you see that, you're like, you know what, I think my kids might be at risk. This is an opportunity to bring them out to this event, to be able to expose them and to teach them what happens after the fact, to deter them from wanting to engage any further or even go any further in what activities that they may be going into, that the parents may not even realize, but they see it, they acknowledge it, and they're like, okay, I need to do something. And this is an opportunity to bring those kids out, and for the parents to also be educated as well, because there's things that parents, we don't realize. There's some things that we don't know, and our children, our youth these days, they're a lot more savvy and intelligent than we give them credit for. There's things that they've been exposed to, like Kevin said, that they're exposed to that we were never exposed to in our upbringing, that it isn't until our late 30s or 40s and we're like, what the world is this?
Exactly.
But our kids at such a young age are exposed to it already. So it's also educating the family, the parents, on what to pick up on, what to notice, what to see, and to help get their kids the help that they need.
What should the parent look for? What should the grandmother or grandfather look for?
Oh my goodness. You can tell a shift in your child's attitude, the way they talk, the way they dress, the way they move, just different things that you can pick up on. Every kid is different, but you knowing your child, those things are being more secretive, more quiet, more to themselves, hanging out with different groups of people. You can just tell in the way your child talks, like, that's different. They're talking different. They dress different. They're hanging out later hours, going different places differently, new groups of different friends. Just the little things to pick up on, that those lead to the bigger things.
Got you. And Dr. Zappa?
Even though this is going to be, in some ways, an in-your-face educational event, I want to also emphasize that the goal is to be inspirational to this at-risk youth. It is to let them have information to make the right choice. To that end, we will also be having career guidance there. We're going to have representation from the hospital, from EMS, and from the police department, in letting them talk to people about what it's like to have a career in this area. What are the good choices to make in order to get that kind of career?
Yes.
And in the end, if having this event and the others that we have planned for in 2024 save some lives, decrease some victims of gun violence, that would make me and our entire team at the hospital happy to have any number of less loved ones to talk to sit down and have that horrible conversation, telling them, I'm sorry, there was nothing I could do. They're gone.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, on that note, please join me in thanking once again Sergeant Alpha Caldwell with the Fayetteville Police Department. We also had with us today, hold on, Mr. Kevin.
I've been all of those
just lost
people.
all my papers.
I've been all of them.
Anyway, please join me in thanking our guests today, and make sure that you are part of this event on November 13th. It is at Smith Recreation Center, and at what time?
6 p.m. to 9 p.m.
6 p.m. until 9 p.m. Tell everybody, share it. There will be flyers out, and then once I get the information, I'll blast it all over social media as well. But thank you all for being on the broadcast, and thank you for bringing this information.
Thank you.
And you definitely will see me there on the 13th. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this wraps up another broadcast. Our next broadcast is Tuesday, November 14th, and then I can tell you what happened at the event 2 days before. So make sure you plan to join us. For our producers, Shaka Jordan and Ray Thomas, our social media coordinator who has been working hard this morning, Lindsey Graham, and the hardworking team behind the scenes, I'm Omega Jones. Thank you so much for listening and watching Cape Fear Valley Health's Making Rounds Live.